Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Need me to clean your oven?" No problem. This happened to me when I was a field tech for a commercial restaurant repair company. The company charged $110 an hour. Port to port. Meaning from the time I left the shop till I returned. Being from the Southwest, I resemble much of the Bose staff, and working on ovens, I was usually dirty as well. On this particular day, the chef had called in a service call for a convection oven that wasn't working, and I had just finished ordering the parts when some top brass from the front office came in the kitchen to harass the Bose staff, I suppose. One dude in a pair of khakis and a button-up asked me why the ovens were as dirty as they were, and I said, "Got no idea." "Well, you need to get 'em cleaned up." Now usually I would have told him to kiss my butt and walk out, but this particular day I decided to help him out. So I stayed a couple of hours and cleaned up his oven. At $110 an hour. Of course, he disputed the invoice and threatened not to pay, but I had parts on order for another piece of equipment, and if you don't pay, I don't come back and put your crap back together, so yeah, he paid. The next one is titled, "What was that room number again, sir?" Not sure what my wife was reading, but it reminded her of an incident that she told me to share. I was a captain at the time and had been assigned as chief of security for an army hospital. So, as the lingo goes, when the calls came down, I was Dr. Strong. I was in my office though when a LTC, Lieutenant Colonel, came in. "Hey there, Captain, need you to take care of an issue for me." "Oh, course, sir. If it is within my area and power, I'll see what I can do." Well, the general's driver's wife is in the maternity ward having just had her baby, and she has a problematic roommate. Always closing the curtain and blocking her line of sight to the window. Also messing with the TV. I need this woman moved to another room. That's definitely outside my area of control, sir. I don't oversee or control anything with patients unless it is an issue of security, safety, or yes I know, but you know everyone and the doctors and nurses will listen to you more than me. You are one of them now and they rely on you. Sir, really? I know, no promises. This would really make the general happy though. His driver is like a second son to him, so I would really owe you. It's room number XYZ. Just give it your best for a fellow infantryman, okay? Breath deep. Wait a minute, what room number again, sir? He smiled. XYZ. Roger, sir. I'll look into it and do my best. I've got a couple favors I might be able to use. Outstanding. Thanks. And he left. So on up I went to maternity to find the head nurse. She was not pleased, as apparently the LTC had been up there earlier trying to sling his weight around and came to find me when it had no effect. I pointed out the room though and she smiled. We both chuckled a little bit and I asked, "So, can you help me out with making this all be good? Please." Giving me a big friendly smile, "Well, the corner room is open. We could move the bothersome lady in there, though she will likely have a new roommate later today. Then again, once the bed is clean and reset, we will likely be putting another lady in with the driver's wife too. Matter of fact," she paused looking over files. "It will probably be Mrs. Hispanic lady having her fourth kid. She was likely to be going in the corner room, but with the move, she would have to go in with the driver's wife." Me, "Well, if that's how it has to be. As long as we can accommodate the LTC's request." Head nurse, "Okay, but you are helping move the lady out of the room." Me, "Yes ma'am, of course." The lady who had been causing such disturbances for the driver's wife was quite calm and gave no issues with the move, nor even asked any questions. I called the LTC once it was done and made sure to tell him I had no concrete knowledge if or when a new roommate might be moved into the room, but that the staff was really not happy with the move and extra work. He thanked me and I never heard anything of it again. The entertaining part of the whole thing? The bothersome lady who got the room with the better view, the woman who had kept closing the curtain for some privacy and turning down the loud crap the driver's wife kept putting on the TV, was my wife who had just had our first kid. The next one is titled, Start Completely Unnecessary Drama for No Reason? It'll come full circle back you. I've been living in Japan for a little over 2 years with my husband. He was born here and we decided to move to his hometown. It's a small city, but there's enough to do without getting bored. I'd describe us as an AMWF couple, Asian man, white female for those who don't know. It's not so common in Western countries, and it can feel like we are some rare shiny Pokemon as AMWF in rural Japan. Lots of staring, occasional secret picture, or even small chats if an old lady is brave enough to approach us. It can feel uncomfortable eating at a restaurant because kids will turn around in their seat and stare at us the whole time with an open fish mouth. Coincidentally, there's a small US military base located in this city. The closer you are downtown, the more American families you see. I'm constantly mistaken for being military by Americans and Japanese, which is understandable. Besides myself, I only know 5 other interracial marriages here. It's always locals who ask about my American husband when I'm out alone, which I respond in Japanese, Watashi no oto wa nihonjin desu. Koko ni sundamasu, my husband is Japanese and I live here, or something along those lines. Americans never ask about my marriage as they assume my spouse is American. When we are together in public, we do abnormal couples behavior such as holding hands. No, couples rarely hold hands in public, let alone say, I love you. We don't go downtown too often since it's all pay to park and it's a nightmare to find a place. It was a beautiful warm day for the first time in months, but we decided to battle for a spot and walk around the shops. The crowd was heavy since the weather was great and winter was ending. The season for new American families to move here just finished, so I'm sure this was many people's first time to leisurely walk and shop outside. We find a parking spot and made our way to the outside shops. Of course, we are holding hands and casually talking and laughing. Wow! I hear this from an American woman about 10 feet behind us. You should know that a Japanese stereotype against Americans is that we are rudely and obnoxiously loud. And this wow was loud enough for me to turn my head around at the noise. She was with 2 other moms who had like 3 kids each. They were staring at me, but perhaps we just accidentally had eye contact at the right time. Seriously, another little home wrecker is doing this in public? Chill woman, you're so loud even I can hear you. We find a table nearby at the Starbucks outside. We are enjoying our drinks when the same group of women approached us with their strollers in tow. They definitely had some sort of purpose with something to say to us. Let's call her Honor, woman in Japanese. Honor, excuse me, but you need to keep whatever you're doing in your messed up home. Doing that in public in front of families to see is disgusting and immoral. My kids don't need to see such a bad display of marriage. I'm so confused, as was my husband who can speak English. Who knew drinking coffee outside was a crime against humanity and marriage? Me, am sorry? What did we do? Honor, you know exactly what you're doing. She points to my wedding ring. Me, no, I don't. Honor, good lord, does your husband know about this? Is he on a ship right now? That's so like a dependopotamus. Her friends laugh. In case you don't speak military, a dependopotamus is slang for a military wife who stays at home all day, doesn't clean, uses their spouse as an ATM, and looks like Jabba the Hutt. It dawns on me, she thinks I'm a military spouse and I'm cheating on my American husband. I started laughing because she's suggesting I'm cheating on my husband, with my husband. Me, this is my spouse. I'm actually not part of the military community and have a Japanese visa. Honor looks at my significant other up and down. The 2 women behind her apologize, but the Honor didn't believe it. Honor, no one would voluntarily want to live in this little town. Nice lie, but you're not representing the military community. You make all of us wives look like whores. Who is your husband and what's his rank? Also, I need your dependent ID. My husband is a high rank, so he'll make sure your husband is aware of your infidelity. She pulls out her phone to probably type my response. I'm offended since this is actually a nice place to live and very open to foreigners. Me, look, my husband's name is Ray, not his real name, I don't want to reveal personal info, and he's sitting right here. I'm not going to show you my military ID since I don't have one, and you're not the police. As proof, you can obviously see our wedding bands match, and here's a picture. I show her my phone screen, which is of us in traditional Japanese clothes on our wedding day. Her eyes became huge at the picture. Her two friends and their spawn have already started walking away. Honor, why are you in a relationship with him? You should be in a normal relationship and start having a family with American kids. She says some other statements which I'd consider racist against the Asian race. It's so ironic because we are in Japan, and she's fussing about me being married to a Japanese man. My husband has been quiet throughout the whole exchange and says to me we should go. I agree and stood up. Me, stop. The things you are saying are extremely offensive. I was part of the military community myself some years ago, and what you're doing is against spousal conduct. She smirked. Go ahead and tell people what I did, then. My high-ranking husband is an E7, and everything will be swept under the rug no matter what happens. You can't touch me. So that's what I did. Note, this is a small military community. Someone does something minor and it's talked about between wives like chickens. Later that day, I run into my friend who works on the base, and she's well known in the community for being one of the main event coordinators. I don't miss this chance to comply with Honor's demand and explain to my friend about the exchange and how it made my husband extremely uncomfortable with her remarks. She asked me if this person looked like so-and-so, which I said yes. My friend rolls her eyes. Friend, she just arrived a couple of months ago and is already causing problems with rumors and drama. Looks like we have a racist, too. I'll make sure what she said is passed on. It's been half a year later and I didn't hear anything about Honor again since I distanced myself from making military friends here. I've only been in my new city for a little over 2 years and experienced more drama from military families than I have my whole high school career. That is, until now. Last week, I ran into my friend who's getting ready to leave back to the United States. We had a little discussion about her moving and my family planning and dropped a huge surprise. Friend, do you remember Honor, who accused you of cheating on your non-existent military spouse and called your husband a racist name? Me, of course. I haven't heard anything from her since. Friend, well, I mentioned we were already having problems with her not long after she got here. I told my boss that there's a person who was bothering and threatening civilians and asking for IDs, which isn't allowed for someone with her status. My boss was extremely interested after I mentioned her name because Honor was scheduled for an interview in my department. I suggested we look at her social media accounts from her past behavior because we don't tolerate racism. It was easy to find her Twitter and Facebook, particularly Facebook since we have many mutual friends. Her SNS was shocking. While she set her Facebook to private, her Twitter was littered with malicious tweets and retweets. This included racism slang for many nationalities, colorful language, and using her husband's military rank to bully others. She made it very clear that she wants to see her current city burned to the ground, and why would anyone want to learn Japanese since it sounds terrible? We printed some of the more extreme things she posted and we still invited her to the interview. Oh, and did I mention my boss is Japanese? So she comes into the interview, which I was part of. I asked 3 good things about her, which is she says dependent, gets things done, and friendly. My boss just looked at her for a second before he pulled out her tweets and asked her to explain how she can friendly serve the local community if she hates it so much. Honor was floored and said someone hacked into her account, despite there being at least 3 years of slanderous tweets. We thanked her for coming and said we can't accept an employee with this conduct. As far as I know, she's still not working because some spouses found her Twitter not long after the interview and was shared in all departments. No one will touch her application now. Me, so all of this was discovered because I told you about her accusations? Friend, yes. Oh, and she's kind of an outcast socially right now because she cheated on her husband a couple of months ago. There you have it, folks, because one person couldn't mind their own business, they lost a potential job and had their social media exposure. Super ironic since she became the dependopotamus and adulterer, the same thing she was accusing me of. The next one is titled, Put Me in Detention Because of an Overdue Book? My prayers have been answered. It was the late 90s, I was still wearing too much flannel and continuing my historical trend of keeping books from the library much too long. I had a paper due for my sophomore Global Studies class, so I naturally took out more books than I could read, wrote the essay, and completely forgot about the books piled in the corner of my bedroom. After a series of overdue slips sent to my homeroom, I eventually did return the 4 or 5 books one sunny afternoon in the anonymous drop book during a study period. Promptly moved on to bigger and better things. About 2 weeks later, I was called down to the assistant principal's office in that space of time before classes officially started that was reserved for one thing and one thing only: the reprobates and delinquents were in trouble. I walked the halls thinking that surely this was just a timing mishap and I was being summoned to receive congratulations for some kind of award I didn't know I had entered into a competition for. Yup, he just wants to prepare me for the surprise ticker tape parade. I was wholly unprepared to hear that I was receiving lunch detention, to start immediately, because I had not returned a single book, that I still remember was slim and had a white and red cover, from my GS paper research. I tried to argue that there was a mistake since I was sure, like I am sure that I have fingertips, that I had returned it. But he could not be moved, and I was sentenced to indefinite lunch detention until I either returned the book or paid the $16 to replace it. I left the office, late for the first period, defeated, but kept my head held high at lunch later that day as I walked past the entirety of the cafeteria, which held a couple hundred of my peers. Plastic food tray in hand, I went down the hall to the old shop classroom that had since been moved and the awaiting detention. I checked in with Mrs. Brown at her desk in front and took an inconspicuous seat in the back. Staring down at my canned peach slices, I braced for the worst. A ruckus was going to break out any minute, I could tell. But once my ears stopped ringing, I discovered that it was really a calm escape from the crowded and rowdy lunchroom. I ate slowly that day, enjoyed my young thoughts in blissful quiet, and wondered what kind of heaven was this. To be fair, I did search far and wide for that book that first day. Attempts to find it in my locker, bedroom, and backpack were fruitless, and the general consensus in my home was that the school was being ridiculous. I certainly wasn't going to pay for something I didn't lose. So the next day, considering my brief brush with the law and the invisible stain already attached to my reputation, I went armed with a book and my lunch past the maddening crowds to the detention room. I sat there, day after day, for nearly 2 months of lunches. In retrospect, to this day those remain some of the most relaxing lunch breaks of my life. I had around 40 solid minutes to recharge in, mostly, complete silence with my reasonably priced lunch and whatever book I was currently reading. I had to recount my origin story a few times since no one could figure out how the quiet bookworm of a girl who had never been in trouble before had landed in the wilds of detention, but I was mostly left to my own devices in this newly found peaceful retreat. I was friendly with Mrs. Brown, who had worked for the district of my small town since I was in elementary school, and even hooked her up with a sweet horse whisper poster that she loved from my family's mum and pop video store. She must have felt bad for me because somewhere around the 1-month mark she started up a collection to cover the cost of the book. She added the initial donation, but teachers who would stop by to chit-chat would add loose change to it, and Race to Buy My Freedom was on. After a few weeks, she handed me just under $7. My love of solitude was no match for the guilt of carrying around that money or my mum, who had just started a new job in the school district, so with a heavy heart, I paid in full for the missing book and went back to my old lunch table in the thick of the action. Months later, during the last week of school, I was called down to the library at my convenience and with sweaty palms forced myself to face the music over what was inevitably going to be yet another overdue book at the end of the day. Well, lo and behold, the end-of-year inventory check had located the book as waylaid in the wrong section of the library. I received a few sheepish looks from the librarians as they refunded the money and apologized in a backward way that still made me the bad guy, as overdue books are the real blemish on one's character, so how were they to assume that I didn't lose the book? Remember my mum's new job in the school? Well, she just happened to be walking by the library just as I was finishing up, and to say that she laid into them is far too extreme sounding. But she did scold some stern-faced librarians into giving me a proper apology. She also demanded that they look into reforming their system and, my favorite part, take the proper measures to expunge my record. She was very concerned about me carrying around the albatross of false accusation apparently. And just like that, my life of crime was over. Quote. The next one is titled, Overly Detailed. I used to work as an hourly technician, bottom rung of the service chain, and we had a repeat customer that would come in for oil and tires. This customer, a Karen, would complain about anything out of place or smudged on her shitty Dodge Magnum. One day she came in for 4 tires, and my service manager asked me to make an account of anything prior to my service. I took 4 hours on her vehicle as she waited on an uncomfortable bench writing up every smudge and scratch on the exterior of the vehicle. The final report was a 10-page manifesto on her shitty station wagon, after which she never returned. The next one is titled, It Pays to Be More Specific. I work at a grocery store as the head of the beer area, serving beers for consumption in store and generally maintaining the beer and wine section. My coworker works as a runner for the to-go grocery service where a customer can call in or place an order online. The runners gather the items and the customer picks up their order at a prearranged time. A customer had called in and told my coworker to add any Christmas Y beer that you can find. He immediately consults me on this and I walk him around the department and point out all the seasonal and Christmas beer that I have in stock, a rather significant number, and he adds them to the cart. After it was said and done, he told me the order total was almost $400. Sometimes it pays to take the time to be specific. The last one is titled, Fine, I'll do the layouts early. Backstory: I used to work for a large retail store. My job position was reset-led. This basically meant corporate would upload the new planograms, product layouts for each section, to a calendar, just a list of layouts, arranged by due date, and I would be the one doing the layouts. Now, I was supposed to have an assistant, but that never happened. When I got promoted to this position, the previous reset lead was already 3 weeks plus behind. I caught it up and finished each week's layouts early. Basically, I was a layout rockstar. Normal practice for the clothing side softlines was I would print the layouts at the beginning of the week they were due. This was when they became active, and give them to the softlines manager. And they would handle them, since they knew the products and the layouts weren't done the same way as hardlines layouts. One week, the store manager, Kyle, who has never been involved with anything store-related, much less layouts, tells me there are softlines layouts to do and he wants me to focus on them. I, being the rockstar I am, already knew about them and their due dates, which happened to be 3 weeks away. I told Kyle they weren't due yet, and he basically tells me to do them anyways. The malicious compliance: I print the layouts, and quickly realize the floor plans, maps of the area that show where the layouts belong, for the 20-foot wall aren't in the system yet. I start asking softlines people about the floor plans, they have no idea. I talk to hardlines manager, previous reset lead, and she tells me which order she thinks they go in. So off I go to softlines. Once in softlines I had a realization. Normally I can scan a product and press Ctrl P and the scanner gives me a sequence number for where in the layout the product goes. But since the softlines layouts aren't active, I get the old sequence number, which is useless. So I have to look at the UPC number on the package, then try to find it in the layout paperwork. Most products have multiple UPCs and the papers only list one, to get the sequence. Basically I'm screwed. So I spend 2 full days taking products off this 20-foot bra and panty wall and filling shopping carts. I get all the peg hooks up, and my week is up. Normally this size wall would take me less than a day even with horrible layouts. Fallout: I didn't get my layouts that were actually due done. Kyle has to answer for this. He doesn't even get talked to. Turns out hardlines manager was wrong about what order the layouts go in. Softlines manager has to redo the whole wall. I saw her working at night redoing it. I don't know if she stayed late or had a late shift. Kyle never bothered me about layouts again. Turns out he was getting a new job anyways, so he didn't last much past that. So that's it. Not a huge deal, but it worked out for the better after that. Thanks for listening.